Well, for more on China's economy, I'm joined by Perry Wong. He's the Managing Director of Research for the Milken Institute. Welcome to the show, Perry.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start off with a breakdown of China's economic data and the path that the country is on right now.
I think it's very optimistic. I think the growth is unexpected. I think both in terms of some momentum and also a little bit twist of direction change, I think, from the export number. But I think the message is somewhat optimistic in the sense that despite the central government's effort to curb credit expansion, to emphasize on reductions in productions to curb pollution. And I think lastly, despite the discouraging somewhat administrative intervention on property development and purchasing, somehow the markets show its resilience. I think those are a good sign. I think the path of reform, I think, yields some limited results, but then the direction is there. That's a good sign.
So let's break some of these things down. Which economic reforms would you say played the biggest role in China's growth over the last year?
I think the restructuring, I think to emphasize on higher value production, perhaps that's where more production or higher value production is gaining some steam, as someone mentioned in the program, on the electric vehicles, etc. I think the service economy at this point is showing its strength. So when the consumer buying, the product makes us right, I think there are plenty of money out there. Its economy, the Chinese economy, is a bit stronger, I think, than the economists, even the Chinese economists in China are giving credit for. Somehow, however, I do question whether the growth momentum can be sustained in the 6.9 to 7% range because further credit deleveraging is in place. And still the goal, I think, for next year's growth is not about number, but it's about better life, better quality growth in China. So we'll see.
And speaking of the challenges, we know that the government has made efforts to try and limit risks in areas such as the financial sector, the housing market, and also reining in debt. How much progress are they making with some of these trouble spots, and how much further do they need to go?
I think it's still a long way to go because we are dealing with two issues. I think the credit cycle is at its peak at this point, so someone have to pay. I think that's a reality. And second, I think the credit expansion in the last couple of years have promoted a lot of huge sum of money at the hand of local government for development. Now, can some of those programs be sustained? And in other words, the central government can curb the credit, the lending to the local government or infrastructure project led by the local government. Somehow those relate to job growth. So if the government curbs the credit growth too quickly, the economy can be cooled to the point that some negative impact can be shown. So it has to be done in a very careful manner. That's one. And second, I think the government have to learn how to garner the revenue other than the budgeted credit expansion. So they have to find a new revenue model for the local government to build a local economy. Especially some of those economies that they don't really rest on a solid ground. I think no one would ever question, for example, infrastructure project in Shenzhen, for example. But someone do question some of the project in the third and fourth tier city that they are building roads to nowhere. I think those are the projects that have been criticized, have been exemplified as a bad practice, but somehow that's still going.
Now, let's talk some of the major themes. What were really the ones that dominated over the last year, and how do you think that's going to change in the coming year?
I think trade is one area. I wouldn't call it the headwind to the growth, but it's a big drag or big risk. Last year, it was a big surprise that the export actually grew in such a strong pace, actually literally reverse the direction for the last 2 years scenario. So that's a big plus to the growth in China. However, coming up this year, the news from Washington and the scenario in the global markets, trade is not the leaders' favorite topics on global stage. So that can be a drag to the growth. Now, if the structural reform in China will take hold, that means the Chinese products are more competitive. That may mitigate some of the risk. But nonetheless, the big picture is international trade is not a favorite tool to promote economic development in China.
All right, well, thank you so much. Perry Wong there, Managing Director of Research at the Milken Institute.